Hey everybody, I'm in the gym getting footage for upcoming videos, and I just returned from doing some gill boulders in the needles for my climbing history channel, Written in Stone, and that's probably linked to this video. If you aren't subscribed, you should go do that. But I was trying to understand how the rock he was climbing on helped shape his movement and philosophy, which ultimately would have a huge effect on bouldering. And that got me thinking about how we in the present see the future. And when we discuss where the limits of climbing difficulty are, we go one of two places. First, to theoretically constructing something harder but possible, filled with pieces we already understand. If only someone capable could find a V15 to a V15 to a low percentage V13 dyno to a pump E15B or whatever. Or we make the incredibly ignorant and short-sighted prediction that holds can't really get smaller and moves can't really get bigger, as if those are the main levers of difficulty. But I get it. It makes sense to go there. But what I want to do here is look somewhere we rarely go, at the potential evolution of the climbers themselves. Now, recently I've been rethinking climbing tactics, going deep into the research about bias and noise and judgment and decision making. And this tactics exploration started with rethinking grades. I have a whole playlist of those videos. And that is after rethinking how climbers engage with movement, which you can find in my Atomic Elements of Climbing Movement course, or I have a playlist of videos for that too. And so all of these disparate dots, combined with trying to experience the past to better understand the future, finally connected and lit up this light bulb in my head. Now, there's this forever conversation about how do we build the perfect climber. And in the 60s, John Gill was definitely in that conversation for nearly everyone. Today, it's going to be Aidan Roberts' high angle crimp and Alex Mago's strength and Adam Ondra's effort and Janja Garnbret's adaptability and Seb Bowen's knee bars and Daniel Wood's lock-offs and Jonathan Siegrist's endurance, etc., etc. But regardless of your exact formula, it's rare that a single climber shows up in several categories, almost certainly never more than 2 or 3, no matter how you slice it. And that's because even the best climbers are relatively bad at things. Ondra's comp style woes and his hatred of toe hooks, Magos' struggle with heel hooks and knee bars. And yes, compared to the 90s, the top climbers of today are way better at almost every aspect of climbing than the best climbers were back then. But what I'm realizing is that it has to be that way. Climbers back then, and even climbers today, but especially back then, had to be specialists in some regard. Because for any skill or technique or asset to be mastered, someone has to first come along and make those initial explorations. Pierre Lalande and the Blossards were climbing dynamically in Fontainebleau in the 40s, but then John Gill comes along in the 50s, and even though he doesn't know about what's gone on in France, he develops what he calls controlled dynamics. That changes the game. But then it has to be taken further. Wolfgang on Action Direct. Then Fred Ruhling pushes it so far that people call him a liar. Eventually, you get a Chris Sharma, who uses that skill incredibly effectively, so much so that it seems like the main tool he has access to, or at least that's what the media shows us because it's exciting. So the game keeps changing. And eventually, gyms set that way regularly. We all have access to that style. So not long after, a lot of us, even relatively new climbers, are pretty good at that style. It seems like it's everywhere. Or we can look at Francois Legrand, who used creative body positions to get around what seemed like a lack of strength. Then eventually Dave Graham takes that style further, before people had really learned to use knee bars and toe hooks and creative body English to fit into hard moves. It looks magical, like wizardry. Now, a lot of climbers are good at that style, which also seems like it's everywhere. And look, I couldn't have faulted you if you thought Chris Sharma was god-tier dynamic climbing, or Dave Graham the ultimate level of wizardry, the absolute mastery of those skills. But it just isn't true, no matter how nostalgic you are about those climbers. Today, A lot of climbers are as good or better at that aspect of Chris's style than Chris was, better at that aspect of Dave's style than Dave was. And some people are better at both than either Chris or Dave. I mean, today's competition climber is a combination of Sharma and Graham with some Johnny Dawes and his slab jumping thrown in, with each individual style taken further and combining with others to create something entirely new. Not to mention their mastery of all of the basic skills and action capacities. But to get where we are, with a bunch of kids running around who could outclimb Sharma and Graham at any given moment, it required those people who took that style to its logical place of high performance and used it as their main asset, often at the expense of being a more complete climber. Without them, not only would setters not as quickly embrace setting and experimenting with those styles and moves, but young climbers wouldn't have hundreds of boulder problems and routes outdoors where those styles are the best solutions. I mean, I had a conversation for my podcast years ago with John Sherman. In it, he mentioned that at first they just walked past all of the compression boulders at Waco Tanks because they didn't recognize them as boulder problems. They didn't fit the paradigm of climbing they had in their heads. Compression climbing didn't yet exist. Someone had to develop it and use it as their superpower. Now, we talk as if Chris Sharma just happens to find the dyno projects, or Dave Graham just happens to find the roofs that require some weird combination of body English and high-level rock crawling skills. But that's not it. The reality is that much of the time, the idea that those are rock climbs just isn't as readily available to people without that specific skill set. Just like the comp kids are now going outside and doing paddle dynos and other strictly comp moves that all of the old people, my peers, said would never transfer to real rock. They said the same kind of shit about Sharma. Wait until he grows up and gains some weight. That style won't work anymore. He's not good, he's just light. Well, most of my peers were all wrong. They sounded dumb then, they sound even dumber now. But still, I get it. It's hard to see into the future. Innovation isn't common. And I'm not saying I have that ability. I just understand that there's still room to progress, even if I can't fathom what it is, and I enjoy interrogating the evidence, so I do my best to be open-minded. But in hindsight, it's easy to see how the past contributed to the new paradigm, and it's happened so many times that we should know better than to doubt it. One generation thought El Cap was impossible. The next climbed it. But in a day, impossible. The next generation did it. But free climbing it? No way. Lynn Hill did it in a day. Now it's been climbed in a couple of hours and free soloed. And already, people are saying it's at the limit. And look, maybe it is. I'm sure there is a limit. But I'm also sure that if we correctly predict it, it's because we got lucky, not because we're smart. I'm also sure that without the Gills and the Legrands, we don't get the Dave Grahams and Chris Sharmas. And without them, we don't get the Tomoa Narasakis or Janja Garnbretts. And without them, we don't get the first-year comp kids of today who are going to easily outclimb the best of this generation because they're going to have a more complete skill set. And here's another interesting wrinkle to this. Just like we were wrong when we thought that Dave and Chris represented the end game of those skills, we can't possibly know if we've reached the top level mastery of any of these newer skills. And we don't know how they will combine with other skills and what will then be revealed on Real Rock when those kids go outside and start looking for new things. Our impossibles will be their stepping stones, same as our stepping stones were yesteryear's impossibles. All you have to do is look at someone like Brooke Rabbitou. Years ago, before Brooke became the big star she is now, I sessioned with her and a crew of women in cats that included Angie Payne, Megan Martin, and Margot Hayes. They all outclimbed me easily, but I walked out of there most impressed by Brooke. She had outclimbed everyone in all of their styles. Now, I already knew she was a badass. She had crushed my projects in my face several times outdoors, but this was different. Not only is she a product of legendary parents who were arguably the best of their generation, but she's also a byproduct of Angie Payne and her crimp and tension mastery, Megan Martin and her dynamic physicality, Margot Hayes and her determined grace. She was so clearly ahead of these women who had real superpowers because she had absorbed their superpowers and improved upon them. And some young girl out there right now is absorbing the superpowers of Brooke and Michaela and Yanya and Oriane, and she's going to be even better than all of them. So it's not about the holds and how small they can be or how far apart they can be. It's about the athletes and their understanding of climbing that's still forming. Athletes who will have slab skills that put to shame the greatest vert climbers of the 80s. Dynamic abilities that make Chris Sharma and Jimmy Webb seem like amateurs. And creativity and adaptability on a higher level of wizardry than the wizard himself. Athletes who will be able to look at panels of rock that we dismiss as too blank or unclimbable that will then reveal an entirely different set of moves that we can't yet even fathom. That is why we're nowhere close to the limits of difficulty in climbing. Nowhere near the limits of awe-inspiring. I suspect, actually, and I understand why this might sound crazy, that we're closer to the beginning than we are to the end. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Where does climbing go in the future? What's happening now that will show up in a big way down the road? Also, I have these connect the dots freestyle chats with the patrons of the Power Company podcast regularly. You can join at the link in the description. See you soon.